Most people think limitation arrives as failure, but that is not how it comes. Limitation usually arrives dressed as comfort. It feels familiar, predictable, even respectable. You wake up, do what you know, repeat what has worked, and life continues without major disruption. From the outside it looks stable, but inside something feels strangely tight. You are not broken, you are not confused. You are simply touching the edge of what you have already mastered. That tightness is not a problem. It is awareness knocking on your consciousness. When you reach the ceiling of your current level, life does not collapse immediately. Instead, it becomes repetitive. The same emotions, the same struggles, the same victories recycled again and again. Nothing is dramatically wrong, but nothing is deeply alive either. This is the most dangerous place to be because it convinces you that this is all there is, and when the mind accepts this is all, growth stops without resistance. The ceiling is subtle. It doesn't shout, it whispers, it tells you, stay safe. It tells you, at least this works. It tells you, others have it worse. But the moment you start justifying stagnation, you have already identified the ceiling. Expansion never begins with permission from the world. It begins with honesty within yourself. Look closely at your life. If your days no longer require curiosity, if your choices no longer demand courage, if your prayers have become repetitive instead of alive, then you are not in peace. You are in a pattern. Patterns are useful, but they are not sacred. When a pattern has served its purpose, holding on to it becomes unconscious living. Many people mistake the ceiling for destiny. They say, "This is who I am," without realizing that who they are has been shaped by yesterday's experiences, not tomorrow's possibilities. Identity becomes a prison when you cling to it too tightly. Growth demands that you loosen your grip on the image you have built of yourself. When the ceiling appears, discomfort follows. You may feel restless without knowing why. You may feel irritated by things that never bothered you before. You may feel an urge to change, but also a fear of losing control. This inner friction is not confusion. It is intelligence waking up. Life is signaling that what brought you here cannot take you further. The problem is not that the ceiling exists. Every level has one. The problem is when you decorate the ceiling and start calling it home. When you arrange your beliefs, routines, and relationships in a way that makes limitation feel permanent, then growth feels like betrayal. But growth is not betrayal. It is alignment with life's natural movement. If you observe nature, nothing stays fixed. Rivers flow, trees grow, seasons shift. Only the human mind insists on freezing a moment and calling it security. The ceiling challenges this illusion. It asks you to either expand your perception or shrink your potential. Notice this carefully. The ceiling is not outside of you. It is not society, not family, not circumstances. Those may influence it, but the ceiling is internal. It is the boundary of how far you believe you can go, how deeply you think you deserve to live, how freely you allow yourself to change. Once you recognize the ceiling, the responsibility shifts to you. You can no longer say you didn't know. Awareness removes excuses. From this moment, staying the same becomes a choice, not a condition. That is why awareness can feel heavy. It hands you your power back. And power is uncomfortable for those who are used to comfort. This is where many people turn back. They sense the ceiling, feel the pressure, and then distract themselves. They stay busy, stay entertained, stay occupied. Anything to avoid the quiet voice that says, "There is more." But that voice does not disappear. It waits patiently because truth does not beg, it remains. If you are listening to this and something inside you feels stirred, not excited but alert, that is not coincidence. That alertness is the first crack in the ceiling. Do not rush to fix it. Do not rush to escape it. Simply stay aware, stay honest, stay present with that feeling. There comes a moment in every inner journey when holding on becomes heavier than letting go. Until that moment, release feels like loss. After that moment, holding on feels like suffocation. Most people do not realize that growth does not begin by adding something new. It begins by subtracting what no longer fits. You are not being asked to become someone else. You are being asked to stop clinging to who you were when you needed protection more than expansion. The identity you carry was not created randomly. It was shaped by survival, by adaptation, by learning how to navigate life with the tools you had at that time. That version of you deserves respect, not rejection. But respect does not mean permanence. When the context changes, the costume must change too. If you continue wearing armor in a place that no longer requires battle, you will forget how to move freely. Letting go is uncomfortable because identity feels personal. You say, "This is how I am," without realizing that this statement was formed in response to circumstances that may no longer exist. What once kept you safe, silent, strong, or guarded may now be the very thing that limits your growth. Life evolves, but if identity does not evolve with it, friction begins. Notice how resistance appears when change is near. The mind brings up memories, labels, and roles. It says, "But this is who you've always been." That voice is not wisdom, it is habit. Habit fears disruption, even when disruption leads to freedom. The mind prefers the known discomfort over the unknown possibility. There is grief in release, even when what you are releasing is small. You may grieve the certainty you once had, the confidence that came from familiarity, the comfort of knowing how things usually go. Growth replaces certainty with awareness. Instead of knowing, you begin sensing. Instead of controlling, you begin trusting. This shift feels like vulnerability because it is. But vulnerability is not weakness. It is openness to life as it is now, not as it used to be. Many people delay their next level because they keep negotiating with the past. They want to move forward without loosening their grip, but life does not move sideways. Expansion requires space, and space is created only when something is set down. You cannot carry every version of yourself into the future. Watch how children grow. They do not apologize for outgrowing their clothes. They simply step into what fits. But adults cling to old identities as if they were moral achievements. You are not more virtuous for staying the same. You are more alive when you allow change. Letting go does not mean erasing your story. It means refusing to let your story dictate your limits. Experience is meant to inform you, not define you. The past is a teacher, not a commander. There will be moments when you feel empty during this transition. That emptiness is not a void, it is space. Space for a deeper intelligence to operate. Space for clarity to arise without force. When you stop filling every moment with who you think you are, life shows you who you can be. Fear often disguises itself as loyalty. Loyalty to family expectations, to social roles, to the image others have of you. But true loyalty is to life itself, and life is always moving forward. When you resist that movement, suffering increases. You do not have to announce your transformation. You do not need permission to evolve. You simply need honesty. When something inside you says, "This no longer feels true," listen quietly. That listening is the act of release. As growth begins to take root, one of the first sensations you may notice is a strange kind of quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of rest, but a spacious silence where familiar voices no longer reach you in the same way. This is where many people panic because the mind has been trained to equate connection with proximity and approval. When those begin to fade, it feels like something is wrong, but often nothing is wrong at all. You are simply moving into alignment with a different rhythm of life. Not everyone can walk beside you when your inner landscape changes. Some relationships are built around who you were when you needed validation, not who you are becoming as you grow into awareness. When that version dissolves, the connection naturally loosens. This is not punishment, and it is not rejection. It is a reorganization of energy. Loneliness during growth is misunderstood. People think loneliness means absence of people, but true loneliness is absence of alignment. You can be surrounded by others and still feel profoundly alone if your inner movement has outpaced your outer environment. When growth accelerates, conversations that once felt nourishing may begin to feel shallow. Activities that once excited you may now feel repetitive. This does not mean you have become superior. It means your inner questions have deepened. The mind will immediately try to interpret this as loss. It will say, "I am being left behind," or "I am leaving others behind." Both of these are stories. Growth is not a race. Everyone moves at their own pace, guided by their own readiness. Just because someone cannot accompany you now does not mean they were never important. It simply means their role was seasonal. Nature understands this well. Leaves fall not because the tree hates them, but because the tree is preparing for something new. The falling is not failure, it is intelligence. But humans resist this process because we attach our sense of self to who stays with us. We fear that if we grow alone, something must be wrong with us. In this phase, the desire to go back can be strong. The mind will tempt you with nostalgia, reminding you of laughter, comfort, shared history. Nostalgia is powerful, but it is selective. It remembers warmth and forgets stagnation. If you return only to feel less alone, you may find that you are more disconnected than before, because you have already changed. Solitude during growth is not meant to isolate you forever. It is meant to recalibrate you. When external voices quiet down, your inner voice becomes audible. This is essential. Without this pause, growth becomes imitation. You start adjusting yourself to fit others instead of discovering what is genuinely emerging within you. This space can feel uncomfortable because it removes distraction. There is no one to mirror you back to yourself, no one to affirm or question your choices. You begin to meet yourself without filters. This is not always pleasant, but it is deeply clarifying. You see where your motivations are clean and where they are driven by fear. You notice how often you seek approval instead of truth. Many people try to escape this stage by staying busy, constantly connected, constantly engaged. But growth requires stillness at certain points. Just as a seed germinates underground, unseen, your inner transformation needs darkness and silence to stabilize. If you dig it up too early, you interrupt the process. Over time, something shifts, the loneliness softens, it becomes spacious rather than empty. You begin to enjoy your own presence, thoughts slow down, awareness sharpens. You realize that being alone does not mean being incomplete. It means you are becoming rooted within yourself rather than leaning on external structures. From this place, new connections form naturally, not out of need, but out of resonance. These relationships do not demand that you shrink or perform. They meet you where you are, not where you used to be. But these connections can only arrive if you do not rush through this solitary passage. If you are experiencing this sense of distance right now, do not label it as failure. Do not rush to fix it. Simply observe it. Allow it to teach you what it is meant to teach. Growth is not loud. It is quiet, subtle, and often misunderstood in its early stages. As you move deeper into growth, you begin to realize that inspiration alone cannot carry you forward. Inspiration opens the door, but discipline is what allows you to stay in the room. Many people wait to feel motivated before they act, not understanding that motivation is a guest. It comes and goes. Discipline, however, is a structure you build so that growth continues even when enthusiasm is absent. At earlier levels, effort was enough. You tried when you felt like it, rested when you didn't, adjusted when circumstances forced you to. But as you rise, life becomes less forgiving of inconsistency, not because it is cruel, but because the stakes are higher. What you are handling now requires steadiness, not intensity. Intensity burns quickly. Steadiness transforms slowly and completely. Discipline is often misunderstood as control or punishment. In truth, it is self-respect in action. It is the ability to choose what serves your future over what satisfies your present impulse. When discipline is missing, life feels chaotic. When discipline is present, life feels directed, even when it is challenging. Notice how resistance shows up when new discipline is required. The mind will say, "This is too much," or "I used to be fine without this." That may be true, but you are not being called to remain where you were. Growth naturally demands refinement. What once worked casually must now be done consciously. New levels ask new questions of you. How do you manage your time when more is demanded of your attention? How do you manage your energy when distractions multiply? How do you maintain clarity when pressure increases? Discipline is the answer to these questions, not willpower. Willpower is exhausting because it relies on force. Discipline is sustainable because it relies on design. You do not argue with yourself every day when your life is designed around what matters. You simply act. This is why routines are powerful, not because they are rigid, but because they remove unnecessary decision-making. When discipline is aligned with awareness, it feels liberating. You wake up knowing what must be done, not as a burden, but as a rhythm. Like breathing, it becomes natural, but in the beginning it feels awkward, even restrictive. This phase tests your sincerity. Do you want change, or do you want comfort disguised as change? Many people sabotage themselves here. They recognize the need for new habits, but they approach them with resentment. They feel forced rather than committed. When discipline is treated as an enemy, it will never last. It must be understood as an ally that protects your growth from your own inconsistency. Look closely at what drains you. Not dramatically, but subtly. Unnecessary conversations, scattered attention, overcommitment. Discipline begins by saying no to what leaks your energy. Every yes has a cost. If you say yes to everything, you dilute your focus and weaken your direction. This does not mean becoming rigid or harsh with yourself. True discipline is intelligent, not brutal. It allows rest, but not escape. It allows flexibility, but not avoidance. It knows the difference between honoring your limits and indulging your resistance. As discipline stabilizes, something shifts internally. You begin to trust yourself. Self-trust is born when your actions align with your intentions consistently. Without discipline, confidence is fragile. With discipline, confidence becomes grounded because it is supported by evidence. Over time, the very practices that once felt demanding begin to feel necessary. You miss them when they are absent. This is a sign of integration. Discipline has moved from effort to embodiment. At this stage, growth no longer depends on circumstances. Whether life is calm or chaotic, you remain anchored. This is when momentum builds quietly. Others may not see it yet, but inside, something solid has formed. As you rise into a new dimension of life, one subtle but powerful shift must happen within you. The way you speak must come from a deeper place. Not louder, not aggressive, not demanding, but rooted. Authority is not something you borrow from others' approval. It is something that emerges when you are aligned with yourself. Until that alignment happens, the voice wavers. Once it happens, the voice carries weight even in silence. Most people think authority comes from position, experience, or recognition. These may amplify a voice, but they do not create it. True authority is born when what you say, what you think, and what you do begin to move in the same direction. When there is no internal contradiction, your words land differently. You do not need to convince, you simply express. At earlier stages of life, speaking often comes from insecurity. You speak to be accepted, to be liked, to be understood. There is nothing wrong with this. It is part of learning how to belong, but as awareness grows, this need becomes a limitation. When your words are shaped by the fear of reaction, they lose their power. You begin editing truth before it reaches your lips. Authority begins the moment you stop negotiating with yourself. When you are clear inwardly, you no longer over-explain outwardly. You say what is needed, no more, no less. This clarity can feel uncomfortable at first because it removes the cushion of approval. Some people may misunderstand you. Some may resist you. That resistance is not a problem. It is feedback that your voice is no longer blending into the background. There is a difference between silence and suppression. Silence can be conscious and powerful. Suppression is unconscious and draining. When you suppress your voice repeatedly, the body carries the weight. Tension builds, frustration accumulates. Over time, you may not even know what you truly think anymore because you have practiced not saying it. Speaking with authority does not mean speaking all the time. In fact, it often means speaking less. When words are aligned, they do not need decoration. They do not rush. They arrive complete. This kind of speech does not seek agreement. It offers clarity. Notice how you feel when you speak from this place. There is no urgency, no anxiety about being received. You are present, you are grounded. Even if the response is uncertain, you remain steady. This steadiness is felt by others even if they cannot explain why. Many people avoid this shift because it changes dynamics. When you speak with authority, certain relationships must adjust. Those who were comfortable when you were unsure may feel unsettled. This is not because you are doing something wrong, but because you are no longer asking for permission to exist fully. Authority is not domination. It does not impose. It does not force. It simply stands. Like a mountain, it does not chase validation from the valley. It is where it is. When you speak from this place, even disagreement becomes respectful, because there is no hidden agenda behind your words. To develop this voice, you must listen deeply first, not to opinions, but to your own inner movement. When something feels true, sit with it, let it mature. Do not rush to express half-formed thoughts. Authority grows when patience meets clarity. Also, watch the gap between intention and expression. If you repeatedly say what sounds acceptable rather than what feels true, that gap widens. Over time, you may lose trust in your own voice. Rebuilding that trust requires small acts of honesty. Speak simply, speak cleanly, speak when it matters. As you practice this, confidence stabilizes. Not the confidence that performs, but the confidence that rests. You no longer measure yourself by reactions. You measure yourself by alignment. This is a significant shift. From here, your presence alone communicates strength. If you notice a hesitation rising in your throat, pause. Do not judge it. Ask gently whether it comes from wisdom or fear. Wisdom waits, fear avoids. Learning to tell the difference changes everything. When movement becomes real, resistance appears just as naturally as a shadow follows the body. Many people misunderstand this moment. They think resistance means something has gone wrong, that they have chosen the wrong path, or that they should slow down. In truth, resistance is not a signal to stop. It is a signal that transformation has begun. If nothing within you or around you resists change, it usually means you are not moving very far. Resistance arises because every system, mental, emotional, social, prefers familiarity. Even when familiarity is uncomfortable, it is predictable. Growth introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty unsettles the mind. The mind's job is not to help you evolve. Its job is to keep you safe according to past data. So when you step into something new, the mind reacts, doubt appears, fear speaks louder, old habits demand attention. This is not failure. This is biology and conditioning doing what they were trained to do. External resistance also shows up. People question you. Circumstances become inconvenient. Progress feels slower than expected. This is where many lose clarity. They assume ease is confirmation and struggle is rejection. But life does not work that way. Ease often comes after alignment, not before it. Resistance sharpens awareness. It forces you to become conscious rather than reactive. Observe this carefully. Resistance does not come to stop you. It comes to reveal how committed you are. When you were casual about growth, there was little pushback. The moment your intent becomes serious, friction increases. This is not because life is against you, but because something within you is reorganizing, and reorganization always creates temporary tension. Fear is the most common form of resistance. It disguises itself as logic. It asks sensible questions. What if this fails? What if you lose what you have? What if people judge you? These questions sound intelligent, but they are rooted in preservation, not possibility. If you wait for fear to disappear before acting, you will wait forever. Fear does not vanish with time. It diminishes with movement. Another form of resistance is self-doubt. You suddenly question your abilities, your worth, your readiness. This doubt often appears strongest right before a breakthrough. The mind checks whether you are serious or just experimenting. If you retreat, doubt wins. If you stay present, doubt loses its authority. There is also resistance that comes from others. Sometimes it is subtle. A change in tone, a lack of enthusiasm, a gentle discouragement. Sometimes it is direct. Not everyone will celebrate your expansion. Some people were comfortable with the version of you that needed them. When you grow, the dynamic shifts, and not everyone knows how to adjust. Their resistance is not a verdict on your path. It is information about their limits. The mistake is to personalize resistance. When you make it about your worth, you weaken yourself. Resistance is impersonal. It is part of the mechanics of change. Fire rises when pressure meets fuel. Without resistance, strength does not develop. Muscles grow because they are challenged. Awareness deepens because it is tested. Handling resistance requires steadiness, not aggression. If you fight it emotionally, you become exhausted. If you suppress it, it leaks out in other ways. The key is observation. Notice what arises without immediately reacting. When fear appears, watch it. When doubt speaks, listen without obeying. When obstacles present themselves, respond intelligently instead of emotionally. This is where inner maturity develops. You stop asking, why is this happening to me? And start asking, what is this teaching me? Resistance reveals where you are still attached to comfort, approval, or certainty. Each time you meet it consciously, a layer of unconscious behavior falls away. Do not look for signs that resistance will end. Look for signs that you are becoming more stable within it. The goal is not a frictionless life. The goal is a flexible, grounded presence. When resistance no longer shakes your identity, you have crossed an important threshold. Over time, you will notice something subtle. What once felt like resistance now feels like guidance. Challenges become refining forces rather than threats. You move forward not because everything is easy, but because you are no longer ruled by discomfort.